Welcome to the Beyond the Call Sheet podcast series, where we interview creatives and hear their journey working in the creative arts.
Hi, I'm Caren. I'm founder of a hair and makeup agency in London.
When did you move to London and what work did you do once you moved here?
I moved to London when I was 18. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and most of my friends had gone to university all over the country. All I did know was that I wanted to leave the place I lived. I wanted to walk down the street and not know anybody. And I wanted to just try and find something, an area which I really wanted to work in. So I started in retail in the West End, and I trained through management, and then I moved to work for a British fashion designer. I set up a store for her in Knightsbridge, and then I went to work in a design studio. There were many great opportunities there, and I shadowed all sorts of people in different roles, and I learned a lot. But I also realised that I didn't think there was really a place there for me. I went out one evening with a really old friend of mine, and she'd started working for a very established, of the moment, fashion photographer. And she told me about a job that was going at a hair and makeup agency. So I applied and just thought, I'll just go for it.
How was the experience working at an agency for the first time?
I started working at the agency, and my boss was pregnant. So she was supposed to be training me for a few months, and in fact went into labour after 10 days, which was slightly terrifying. It was definitely sink or swim, but with the support of the artist that we represented, somehow I managed to get through it and learnt very, very fast. I worked for her for 8 years. It was an incredible education. Back then, there were very few hair and makeup agents, so we had a lot of the people, the biggest people in the industry, some of whom are still working today, still first generation. And I learnt a lot about people, managing people, being supportive, nurturing, how to help them. I feel that one of the biggest things with being an artist in this industry is the ups and downs and being able to cope with those. So that was a huge thing for me. Listening, a lot of listening.
What motivated you to set up your own agency?
So after 8 years, I decided that I wanted to start my own agency. I was becoming a mum for the second time, and I just decided that I wanted to be my own boss. I did, however, have a great friend who's still a great friend, and we decided that we would start together. We did not want to poach anyone from my former agency, so we started looking after photographers, which was really interesting and completely new to us. And then after about a year or so, I just said to her, look, I love hair and makeup. What are we doing? This is what I've got 8 years experience and I'm not using it. So we started to take on hair and makeup people. I've always worked with instinct in terms of representation. So a feeling that I get about someone, obviously their work, if I see, I just look at what they're doing within a visual, and sometimes it could be nothing, but that's the point. You know, there are so many facets to it, but ultimately it's down to gut instinct as to whether I want to work with someone or not, and whether I think they're going to work. It's quite hard to know that because there are so many elements also about being an artist other than just the talent. So the personality and the mental strength is enormous. I always say to people artists that I start to work with that we're here to stand alongside them through the roller coaster ride, which it is. And it doesn't get any easier. The higher you go, you just have further to fall.
When you moved out of London, what were the advantages?
After 9 years, I decided to move out of London, just 20 miles out, so not far, but it was still quite a big step at that point. Most agents were in London. So websites were just coming into play, portfolios were online, and so it was definitely possible. I talked to the artists, asked them to trust me, as I knew that being able to dedicate more time when I was wasting it travelling would just mean that everyone would go further and I could give them more time and space.
How has the industry changed over the years from your perspective?
The differences are many. I think that obviously it was a completely different time, particularly before social media. And the industry in general was a different place. There was more work, there were less artists. It was still very competitive. But there were potentially bigger egos, maybe. And managing people for me has always been about, as I've already said, listening, managing expectation, encouragement, but also keeping everything real, trying to keep everything real, which maybe 20 years ago was a little more difficult than it is now. There was, although people were humble and they worked really hard, once people started to become successful, they just had access potentially to being able to behave in different ways, and it was okay and acceptable because of their position, respected position in the industry. As a manager, it was just about hand-holding and making sure that they were doing everything in the right way to continue to be working with those clients and not doing anything detrimental. I always have said to everyone, and tried to also myself, be nice to everyone. Go on set, be nice to everyone. Why wouldn't you be anyway in life? And you never know where people are going to go. You know, the assistant that's made you a cup of tea deserves a thank you, and one day could be on a set in a much more senior role. And although it is a big business, when you're near the top, it's quite a small business. So everyone, I think now, is much more aware of their behaviour, the fact that you're only as good as the last job you did, and you don't know when you're going to get your next job. So be grateful, appreciative, and always do things in a positive way.
What are your thoughts on the always-on aspects of the job?
Being available 24/7 is, and always has been, a thing with being an agent. I think that being woken up at 2 a.m. or 5 a.m., having people in different countries across the world obviously was challenging. I think that through the general communication now is so much better. But for me, I have to say that the always on, it doesn't really bother me. I would rather know that an artist can get hold of me if they need to, if they are not feeling great, just want to have a chat, or they're having an emergency. I prefer to know that I'm always accessible, and I know to some people that might be a bit too much in terms of life-work balance, but for me, I think going from working in the same role without the ability to be in such good contact with people was more stressful. I'd rather have everything open all the time and know that it's very unusual that someone's in a desert somewhere in the middle of nowhere and can't call me and everything's going wrong. Sometimes artists just need a bit of moral support in the middle of a shoot for whatever reason, and knowing that I'm always contactable is definitely an advantage.
How has social media changed and informed the way that you work?
Social media has changed everything for the industry. Some things in a positive way and others more challenging. I think particularly for artists. It has become an interesting way to understand more about an artist. If you go onto their own account, you see not just their work, but potentially a bit more of their character, who they are, who is this person. We all know that it's not just about the talent, and the person that you're booking to go into the room to do the job, you want to know a bit about who they are. And whereas in the old days, someone would look on a website at a bio and just read some words about potentially who they'd work with. Now you can see a collection of work that the artist has chosen to put out there to portray themselves. So I think from that perspective, it's positive. I think in terms of peers and the mental pressure of being freelance, it's quite difficult because I always say to artists, they'll laugh if they're watching this, never look sideways and definitely don't look backwards. And I think that's really true. You've just got to stay in your lane, believe in yourself, and just go for it. Believe in your talent, and if you're going through a little bit of a quiet time, it'll all come back round.
How has your business evolved and adapted over the years?
I've learned a lot about social media and brands and how to make that work for us as a hair and makeup agency, mainly through moments. So it would be maybe the Met Gala, for example, and an artist would be booked to work with a VIP. And so we would look for a brand that would be a good fit aesthetically with the artist. Also, very, very important that it needs to be in the right area for the VIP. And we negotiate between the publicist to check that everything's okay with the affiliation. And then the artist would make social content during the moment. So behind the scenes, getting ready, final look, just before stepping on the red carpet. And then we would share that with the client, and the client would post it on their channels. We'd negotiate fees, obviously, for that. And that, I think, is the new wave of working with celebrity and it really working. I think that we've been very, very lucky, and I've worked and I'm working with some amazing artists who have really great clients who are not just doing red carpets, but they're in advertising campaigns, they're walking in shows or sitting front row. They're doing all sorts of interesting projects, which then takes the artist into all different echelons of the world, really. So I think that's where it's really interesting. I also look after 2 content creators within the agency. They are professional hair and makeup artists, and we work on all the time getting them brand deals so that they can then make money from their social media channels.
When you reflect upon your time in the industry, how does that make you feel?
I feel incredibly lucky to have had the opportunity to work in this industry at all, let alone for the decades that I have. I have had the most fun, so many crazy times, and worked with just the best. I think working with creative people is so interesting. Yes, there are ups and downs, but we as a collective it's just so unique working in this industry. And I'm really proud that I've been able to I'm still here and still loving it. And I can't quite imagine myself ever walking away. I think looking back, there are far too many amazing times to mention 1 or 2. But the laughter, the tears maybe, but just the crazy times, the pinch me, is this real? And I know that all of us will look back and think that we've been so incredibly lucky to have had such a colourful journey in an extraordinary business.
What advice would you give to any young creatives out there?
You've got to be very hungry. I think you've always had to be very hungry. I think this industry recognises the desire in people sometimes, just the work ethic. Be prepared to go in, not get paid. I know everyone has to pay their bills, but everyone's always had to pay their bills. And believe in yourself. I think it's very easy for people who are connected in some way to move forwards in the industry. It's much more difficult when you're outside, and you may have been to college even, but then you're like, where do I go? And reach out to people and try and do it maybe in a way that someone else isn't going to do it. Just put something personal in it. Find email addresses. Don't do an info. Try and work out the email format or find it online, and try and go to the person that runs the agency or the photographer themselves that you want to work with, or whatever it is. Really keep going until you've exhausted every opportunity, because if you really want it, you've got to go and get it.
Thanks for watching or listening to Beyond the Call Sheet. I hope you found it interesting, and if you'd like to be notified of the next episode, then don't forget to subscribe or like. Thank you.